This is the story of Little Red Riding Hood, adapted from Charles Perrault and the Grimm brothers. Once upon a time, in a faraway land, in a little village, there lived a country girl, the prettiest creature who was ever seen. Her mother was excessively fond of her, and her grandmother doted on her even more. The little girl had a little Red Riding Hood made for her, and it suited the girl so well that everybody called her Little Red Riding Hood. One day, her mother made some cakes and said to her, "Will you go see how your grandmother is doing? I hear she is very sick. Take her these cakes and this little pot of butter." Little Red Riding Hood set out immediately to go to her grandmother, who lived in another village. She was going through the wood, and when she came upon a wolf, who had a great mind to eat her up, but he dared not to, because of some woodcutters working nearby in the forest. He asked her where she was going. The poor child, who did not know that it was dangerous to stay and talk to strangers, especially a wolf, said to him, "I am going to see my grandmother and carry her a cake and a little pot of butter from my mother." "Does she live far away?" said the wolf. "Oh, I say," answered naive Little Red Riding Hood. "It is beyond the mill that you see there, at the first house in the village." "Well," said the wolf, "that is quite far. You'd better get going if you are going to make it there by sundown. But perhaps she would like some flowers to go along with those cakes." She thought, "that's a good idea. I'll quickly pick some flowers, then continue on my way." And so Little Red Riding Hood turned to a small flower patch to pick the prettiest ones for her grandmother. The wolf ran as fast as he could, taking the shortest path, and the little girl took a roundabout way, getting distracted by gathering nuts and running after butterflies. It was not long before the wolf arrived at the old woman's house. He knocked at the door. "Who's there?" "Your grandchild, Little Red Riding Hood," replied the wolf, counterfeiting her voice. "Who has brought you a cake and a little pot of butter sent to you by mother?" The good grandmother, who was in bed, because she was very ill, cried out, "Pull the bobbin and the latch will open up, and the door will open." The wolf pulled the bobbin, and the door opened, and he immediately fell upon the good woman and ate her up in a moment, for it had been more than 3 days since he had eaten. He then shut the door and got into grandmother's bed. He waited for Little Red Riding Hood, who he wanted for dessert. She came in some time afterwards and knocked at the door. "Who's there?" Little Red Riding Hood, hearing the big voice of the wolf, was at first afraid, but believing her grandmother had a cold and was hoarse, answered, "It is your grandchild, Little Red Riding Hood, who has brought you a cake and a little pot of butter mother sends you." The wolf cried out to her, softening his voice as much as he could, "Pull the bobbin and the latch will go up and the door will open." Little Red Riding Hood pulled the bobbin and the door opened. The wolf, seeing her come in, said to her, hiding himself under the bedsheet, "Put the cake and the little pot of butter upon the stool and come see me." As she approached, she was greatly amazed to see how her grandmother looked in her nightclothes and said to her, "Grandmother, what big arms you have!" "All the better to hug you with, my dear." "Grandmother, what big legs you have!" "All the better to run with, my child." "Grandmother, what big ears you have!" "All the better to hear with, my child." "Grandmother, what big eyes you have!" "All the better to see with, my child." "Grandmother, what big teeth you've got!" "All the better to eat you up with." And saying these words, this wicked wolf fell upon Little Red Riding Hood and ate her all up. With his belly super full, he fell fast asleep in the bed. Shortly after this, a hunter happened to be passing by and heard a strange noise coming through the window. "That poor woman is snoring quite loudly. I should check and see if she's all right," he thought to himself. He went inside, and of course it wasn't the grandmother. It was the wolf. "I have been hunting you for a long time, and at last I have you cornered." He was about to shoot the wolf when he saw his giant belly. "You swallowed her up, didn't you?" The hunter took the wolf outside and cut open his stomach, and out jumped grandmother and Little Red Riding Hood. They thanked the hunter for saving them, and they hugged each other. The hunter filled the wolf's stomach with stones and stitched him back up. Much later, the wolf woke up with a stomach ache, and he crawled to a cave where he was never seen again. Little Red Riding Hood stayed with her grandmother and shared the snacks with her. She vowed she would never talk to strangers on her walks ever again. The end.